Beneath the crust of the earth, where sunlight has never pierced and silence reigns, lies a kingdom eternal. It is not marked by golden temples or the laughter of Olympus, but by stillness, the kind of stillness that chills the soul. This is the underworld. And it is here that kings kneel beside beggars, heroes walk shoulder to shoulder with the forgotten, and every mortal, no matter their glory, meets the same fate. The Greeks feared to name its ruler, whispering instead of him in shadows. For he was not Zeus, who thundered from the sky, nor Poseidon, who churned the seas. He was something far more inevitable, the shadow that follows every life. His name was Hades. In the imagination of mortals, Hades was neither radiant nor merciful. He was silence made flesh, the certainty of death itself. Yet he was also justice, incorruptible, unbending, absolute. He was no demon nor sadist, but the keeper of the final boundary, the God who ensured that balance endured even in death. This is not just a story of endings, it is a story of truth, of justice, of hidden wealth beneath the earth, and of love that bloomed in darkness. This is the journey into the shadows, the story of Hades, Lord of the Underworld. Before the brilliance of Olympus, before thunderbolts split the sky and tridents churned the sea, the world of the Greeks was born in chaos. From this primordial void came the Titans, and among them Cronus and Rhea, destined to shape the fate of the cosmos. Yet destiny came laced with fear. A prophecy whispered that one day Cronus would be overthrown by his own child. And so, in dread and desperation, he chose an unthinkable path. Each time Rhea gave birth, Cronus devoured the child whole. Hestia, Demeter, Hera, Hades, Poseidon. One by one, their cries of life were silenced, swallowed into a darkness deeper than any mortal could imagine. Only the youngest, Zeus, was hidden away by Rhea, spared from his father's hunger. Within the suffocating prison of Cronus' stomach, Hades existed in shadow. He knew no light, no air, no freedom. For him, existence began in captivity. This first chapter of his being was one of silence and confinement, and perhaps it was there that Hades became attuned to the stillness that would forever define him. Where Zeus learned the sky and Poseidon learned the waves, Hades learned the darkness. But darkness is never eternal. When Zeus grew strong, he rose against his father. In the great Titanomachy, the war between gods and titans, Zeus forced Cronus to disgorge the children he had swallowed. Hades, reborn into a world of war and thunder, emerged not as a fragile victim, but as a god forged in struggle. The first breath of freedom he ever tasted was mixed with the smoke of battle. When the war was won and the Titans cast down, the three brothers stood together, Zeus, Poseidon, and Hades. The cosmos had to be divided. Lots were drawn. Zeus claimed the sky, Poseidon the sea, and Hades the underworld. To many, it seemed a cruel fate. The heavens glittered with light, the seas danced with life, but the underworld was silent, unseen, feared. Was Hades cursed with the least of realms? Or was he entrusted with the greatest responsibility of all? For in the underworld lay the truth that no god, no mortal could escape death. Thus, Hades became not merely a ruler, but a keeper. His dominion was not about glory or spectacle, but about inevitability. He was not Thanatos, the bringer of death, but the custodian of what followed. He governed the rivers of the dead, the fields of the afterlife, the abyss of punishment, and the meadows of reward. His realm was the mirror of humanity itself, joy and grief, justice and retribution, remembrance and forgetting. The Greeks did not see his story as tragedy alone. They saw meaning. For what Zeus embodied in law and Poseidon in chaos, Hades embodied in truth. His origin reminded mortals of the most sobering reality, that all beginnings end and all lives, no matter how great, pass through his gates. From the very start, Hades was misunderstood. To some, he was unlucky, cheated of sky and sea. But to those who looked deeper, he was the foundation upon which all else rested. Without death, life could not be cherished. Without endings, beginnings would lose their value. In his origins lies the paradox of Hades. Born in darkness, freed in war, crowned with silence. He was not chosen by cruelty, but by necessity. And in the necessity of death, there is the most profound of truths, that even the gods themselves are bound by order, and that no throne, no kingdom, no heartbeat escapes the shadow of the underworld. To enter the domain of Hades is to cross a threshold unlike any other, a passage where life loosens its grip and silence swallows sound. The Greeks imagined it not as chaos, but as an ordered cosmos beneath the earth, vast, layered, and eternal. This was the underworld. At its borders flowed the Styx, the river black as obsidian, binding even the gods themselves. Upon its waters oaths were sworn, for to break such a vow meant ruin, even for immortals. No mortal could cross Styx alone. They required the ferryman, Charon, his boat creaking across the dark tide. Payment was demanded, a coin in the mouth of the dead. Without it, the soul wandered endlessly, caught between worlds, unable to find rest. And Styx was only the beginning. There was the Acheron, the river of sorrow, where the laments of the newly dead rose like mist. The Cocytus, the river of wailing, where the cries of the lost echoed into eternity. The Phlegethon, a river of fire, searing its banks with eternal flame. And most haunting of all, the Lethe, the river of forgetfulness. To drink from its waters was to surrender memory itself, to erase all traces of mortal life. The geography of the underworld mirrored the human soul. At its darkest pit lay Tartarus, the abyss of punishment. Here, the titans who defied Zeus were chained in endless torment. Here, arrogant kings and oathbreakers bore their eternal burdens. Sisyphus rolling his stone, Tantalus forever thirsting. It was not mere cruelty, but a cosmic justice, a reminder that hubris bore consequence beyond death. Yet not all who entered faced torment. Beyond the shadows stretched the Elysian fields, meadows of eternal spring, where heroes and the virtuous wandered in peace. Golden light bathed the land, flowers never withered, and music lingered in the air. For the Greeks, Elysium was the promise that life well lived was not forgotten. Even in death, honor could flourish. Between Tartarus and Elysium lay the vast plains of the ordinary dead. Neither punished nor exalted, these countless shades drifted in silence, gray and weightless, reflecting the simple truth: most lives end without glory, but none without value. Over it all ruled Hades. He did not swing a sword, nor wield fire or storm. His rule was through stillness, his power in inevitability. Where Zeus's authority was thunder, and Poseidon's dominion was chaos, Hades' sovereignty was truth. His realm reminded mortals of what they most feared, that death is certain, and that justice waits for all. Yet within this stern order lay something more profound. For by Hades' side stood Persephone, queen of the underworld. Her presence was paradox, life dwelling within death. When she ascended, the world blossomed in spring. When she returned to Hades, the earth withered into winter. In their union, the Greeks saw the eternal cycle: death and rebirth, endings and beginnings, shadow and light. The underworld was not hell, it was balance. It was the mirror of existence: sorrow and joy, memory and oblivion, punishment and reward. To the Greeks, it was not simply the fate of the dead, but the structure of the cosmos itself. By envisioning the underworld, they gave form to their deepest truths: that justice is inescapable, that memory fades, that hubris is punished, and that even in death there is beauty. To journey into Hades' realm was not only to imagine what lay beyond life, but to confront what it means to live. The rivers, the plains, the abyss, and the meadows were not distant places, they were reflections of the human heart. And in their depths, mortals recognized themselves. The underworld, silent and eternal, was not only the resting place of souls, it was also the stage for some of the most profound myths, stories where love defied death, where heroes tested their courage, and where even the gods themselves revealed their complexity. The most defining myth was that of Persephone, the queen of the underworld. Hades, struck by her beauty, carried her into his realm. To mortals, it was an abduction. To poets, it was the union of opposites. Life wedded to death, spring entwined with shadow. Her mother, Demeter, goddess of the harvest, mourned so deeply that the world withered. Crops failed, famine spread, and humanity trembled. Only when a compromise was struck, Persephone spending part of the year with Hades and part with Demeter, did balance return. Thus, the cycle of the seasons was born. Springs return, winters decline. Each year, the world itself became a reflection of Persephone's journey. Through her, the Greeks saw the truth. Even in darkness, life continues. Even in death, renewal awaits. But not all myths of Hades were bound to love. Many were bound to trials of courage and truth. Among them was the haunting tale of Orpheus, the mortal whose music could move gods and stones. When his beloved Eurydice died, he descended into the underworld, lyre in hand, his song so sorrowful that even the stern heart of Hades softened. For the first and only time, the Lord of the Dead allowed a mortal to reclaim his love. But Orpheus was warned. He must not look back until they both had reached the world above. Doubt overcame him. He turned, and in that instant, Eurydice was lost forever. The lesson was not cruelty but fragility. Love can defy death, but trust must be absolute. Another mortal who entered Hades' realm was the mighty Heracles, tasked with seizing Cerberus, the three-headed hound who guarded the gates of the dead. With Hades' grim consent, Heracles subdued the beast and carried it to the surface. The tale revealed that even strength itself bowed before Hades' authority. For no hero, no matter how great, could act within the underworld without his permission. And then there was Odysseus, the cunning wanderer. In his endless journey, he too descended to the land of shades, guided by Circe's wisdom. There he spoke with prophets, warriors, and the souls of the dead. Though Hades himself did not appear, the truth was clear. Knowledge, the deepest wisdom of life, could only be gained by facing death. The underworld was the place where the living confronted what they feared most, and through that confrontation found clarity. These myths reveal the paradox of Hades. He was feared yet merciful, stern yet capable of pity. He abducted Persephone, yet gave the world the seasons. He denied Orpheus, yet was moved enough to grant him a chance. He allowed Heracles his triumph, yet reminded all that his gates could not be forced. He did not need to prove his power with thunder or storm. His power was in silence, in law, in inevitability. Through love and wrath, through courage and doubt, Hades was not simply the god of the dead. He was the measure of humanity's deepest struggles, to love beyond mortality, to trust without fear, to face the truth of death with bravery. And so in these myths, mortals glimpse not only a god but themselves, their fears, their hopes, their failures, all refracted through the shadow of Hades. For in his realm, every story became universal, every love fragile, every victory fleeting, every soul equal. Among the gods of Olympus, few names carried the weight of silence like Hades. Mortals called upon Zeus in their prayers for justice. They invoked Poseidon to calm the seas or unleash storms. They sang hymns to Apollo, Athena, and Artemis. But Hades? His name was rarely spoken. For to call his name was to risk drawing his gaze. And to the Greeks, nothing was more terrifying than the eye of the Lord of the Dead. This fear was not born entirely of truth, but of projection. Mortals saw in Hades the thing they most dreaded, inevitability. Unlike the thunder of Zeus, which might pass, or the storms of Poseidon, which might subside, the realm of Hades never yielded. His gates did not open for the living, nor did they close against the dead. He was not chance, nor whim, nor tempest. He was certainty. and certainty to mortals often feels cruel. Yet Hades was not Thanatos, the god of death who carried away souls. He was not a torturer nor a tyrant delighting in pain. His role was deeper, more unyielding, the keeper of justice beyond life. Within his kingdom, every deed was remembered, every oath weighed, every soul set in its rightful place. He did not choose who died, nor when, but once death arrived, he ensured that balance followed. To soften his image, the Greeks often called him Pluton, the wealthy one. For from beneath the earth came all treasures, gold and silver, fertile soil, and the inexhaustible wealth of souls. In this name, Hades was not only ruler of death, but also the source of abundance, prosperity, and the mysterious riches hidden in the world below. It was a name that acknowledged his duality, feared as the end, but revered as the giver of hidden gifts. Still, fear clung to him. Unlike Zeus, who might be swayed by sacrifice, or Poseidon, who could be appeased with offerings, Hades remained remote. His throne was beyond reach, his heart unmoved by flattery. He could not be bribed, coaxed, or deceived. And in this incorruptibility lay his greatest power. For in Hades' realm, all souls were equal. Kings and beggars, heroes and cowards, all stripped of their titles, all standing as shades before the same judgment. This impartiality, though terrifying, was also just. To mortals accustomed to the uneven whims of fate, the fairness of Hades seemed both alien and severe. His justice was not mercy, but truth, the kind of truth that does not bend to desire. And so misunderstanding grew. Mortals painted him as harsh, merciless, even malevolent. They forgot that he never caused death, never hunted souls. They feared him as a destroyer, when in truth he was the keeper of order. The silence of his realm was not cruelty, but necessity. In the end, Hades' greatest misunderstanding was this. People saw in him their own fear of mortality. They mistook inevitability for malice, silence for disdain, justice for cruelty. But the wise understood. They saw that in Hades, the Greeks had imagined something extraordinary, a god who embodied equality, who reminded them that no crown, no victory, no beauty could shield them from truth. To hate Hades was to hate the shadow cast by life itself. To honor him was to accept the balance that underpins all existence. And in that acceptance, there was not despair, but clarity. For only by facing death can life be lived with meaning. Unlike Zeus, who stood upon Olympus with temples glittering in marble, or Poseidon, whose shrines crowned the rocky coasts, Hades had few temples. His name was whispered rather than shouted, his presence acknowledged rather than celebrated. To call upon him was to step too close to shadow, and so his worship was quiet, rare, and veiled in secrecy. Yet absence of temples did not mean absence of reverence. The Greeks knew well that without Hades, there could be no balance. They buried offerings into the soil, black sheep, libations poured into the earth, gifts sent downward to the unseen throne. Prayers were spoken softly at night, as though to disturb his silence was to tempt fate itself. Unlike other gods, Hades was not asked for blessings but recognized for truth. His worship was not transaction, but acknowledgement. The deepest mysteries surrounding Hades were found not in public temples, but in secret rites, the Eleusinian Mysteries. These ceremonies, devoted to Demeter and Persephone, spoke of descent and return, of loss and renewal. Initiates swore oaths of silence, but their hope was clear: to understand the cycle of life and death, and perhaps secure a gentler fate in the world beyond. Though Hades himself was seldom invoked, his presence was everywhere. For without him, Persephone's descent had no meaning, and the mysteries had no power. As Greek culture flowed into Rome, Hades transformed into Pluto, the wealthy one. The Romans emphasized his dominion over not only the dead, but the treasures of the earth. Gold, silver, fertile soil, crops, and abundance, all were Pluto's gifts. In Rome, his image softened, shifting from shadowed ruler to god of prosperity. Still stern, but generous in potential. The underworld was not simply an end, but a source of life's riches. Over centuries, Hades' image evolved in art and philosophy. In sculpture, he was carved with Cerberus at his side, solemn yet regal. In tragedy, his name carried dread, but also inevitability. Philosophers reflected upon him not as a monster, but as the embodiment of order, incorruptible, impartial, eternal. Even Plato used mythic journeys to the underworld as allegories for truth and justice, revealing that beyond fear lay wisdom. In later ages, misunderstandings deepened. To the Christian world, Hades became entangled with hell, a demon rather than a god. His fairness was forgotten, replaced by images of fire and eternal punishment. But in the Renaissance, he returned once more, solemn and majestic, a figure of power in frescoes and operas, no longer devil, but God. Even now, Hades' legacy endures. He haunts literature, films, music, and fantasy worlds. Sometimes villain, sometimes misunderstood ruler, always eternal. His story is told again and again because it speaks not only of death, but of balance. He reminds us that wealth lies not only in gold or jewels, but in truth, in the soil that sustains us, in the justice that outlives us, in the inevitability that shapes us. Hades left few temples of stone, but his worship endures in the cultural memory of humankind. He became less a figure to be adored and more a truth to be remembered. That life is fleeting, that death is certain, and that in their meeting lies the profound beauty of existence. In the silence of the underworld lies a truth older than Olympus, older than myth itself. Hades, often feared, often misunderstood, is not merely the god of death, he is the god of balance, inevitability, and reflection. Where Zeus wields thunder and Poseidon commands storms, Hades requires no display. His power is quiet, incorruptible, unyielding. He does not grant life, nor take it away. He simply receives, and in receiving, he gives meaning to all that came before. In him, mortals confronted the one certainty they could not escape, death. Yet rather than cruelty, this certainty offered clarity. For if life is fleeting, then every moment is precious. If all glory fades, then humility is wisdom. If death equalizes kings and beggars, then justice is not the law of the powerful, but the law of existence itself. The Greeks feared him because he was inevitable. They misunderstood him because they projected their dread onto his silence. But in truth, Hades was a mirror. To look upon him was to look upon oneself. Stripped of wealth, stripped of pride, stripped of all masks, only the soul remained. His enduring power lies not in fear, but in philosophy. Through him, the Greeks articulated what every culture, every era must face, that mortality shapes meaning, that endings are not annihilation, but part of a cycle, that the shadow of death is what gives the light of life its brilliance. In the modern age, Hades speaks still. He speaks in the quiet awe before a funeral pyre, in the silence after loss, in the reflection that follows tragedy. He speaks in literature that wrestles with mortality, in films that portray the inevitability of endings, in philosophy that asks what it means to live well before we die. His voice is present in climate anxieties, in the fragility of human ambition, in the reminder that no empire, no civilization, no individual can outpace time. And yet, his message is not despair. It is awareness. It is an invitation to live fully, to love deeply, to leave behind meaning. For to forget Hades is to forget truth itself. So Hades endures, not as a demon, not as a tyrant, but as the eternal guardian of the final boundary. He is the silence after thunder, the shadow after light, the truth that humbles kings and comforts the weary. He is not the end, but the reminder that in endings there is wisdom, in mortality there is value, and in silence there is eternity. Beneath the earth, where silence stretches beyond time, Hades keeps his watch, not as a monster, but as a guardian, incorruptible, inevitable, eternal. His power is not fire nor storm, but truth itself. The reminder that all must end, and in ending, all becomes meaningful. To the Greeks he was fear. To us he is reflection. He teaches that mortality is not a curse, but the mirror that gives life its value. In Hades' silence, we are reminded to live more fully, to love more deeply, to carry our lives with intention. The journey does not end here. Beyond Hades waits the voices of other gods, each with their own lessons, their own mysteries. Subscribe to Arcane Atlas Legends as we continue through gods and legends, where myth becomes mirror and ancient stories still shape the truths of our world.